Kemi woke up to the early sound of the cock crowing. Every day was a battle for her, but she was used to it. After all, it had been 10 years since her parents had died. She wasn't about to cry on a day like this. She got up and got ready for church. It was her favorite day of the week. As she was about to enter the church, she heard the hissing of the other women. Men and women looked at her with different looks. The women had hate and snare written all over theirs. However, the men's were a little different. Theirs were lingering gaze at a particular place. Only God can save us. Now the church is where the devil comes to find its victim, Lydie said, with dripping malice at the direction of Kemi. How long must we put up with this nonsense? Another woman said. She gestured towards Kemi as she said, this. Kemi's eyes widened with shock. Were they still trying to get her kicked out? The pastor was kind enough to give her a job 3 years ago, and she had been doing her very best at the duties that were given to her. But the women of the church had hated the very sight of her. They had bullied her by calling her different names behind her back and to her very face. Church was supposed to be a place of solace, a place she could find peace from the pain of losing her parents and feeling all alone in the world. But it would seem 3 years of trying to change the perspective of these women had been a waste of time. They had banded together and protested her employment, citing all sorts of reasons. They said she was unlucky because her parents were dead and she was the only one alive. They said she was a walking temptation because she had the bigger assets. They said the devil had sent her to derail their faithful husbands and sons. And they had even written her name and put it in the Bible and prayed for deliverance for her. Kemi tried to make friends with the other young girls, but word had spread from their mother's lips to their ears about staying away from her. She had cried herself to sleep so many times, wishing she could show people the kind of person she was. But no matter how hard she tried, they judged her by her appearance and her life. It wasn't as if she chose how she looked or how her life had been. And she didn't hate herself. She knew that God loved her, and so she loved herself and wouldn't let others' opinions put her down. Every day is a new day, and she was going to live just like that. Pastor Kunle was a kind man. Not only that, he had a moral compass that never swayed or derailed. At his 56 years of age, he was only ever worried about one thing, and that was the women who attended his church. Despite his several preachings, and he himself leading a life he thought his flock would emulate, he was almost defeated when he saw the Women Council go after Kemi persistently. He knew he shouldn't judge, but at his old age, he couldn't help it. And Lydie, who was the head of the Women Council, was getting out of hand, holding a deliverance vigil with Kemi's name. The worst was what happened 2 weeks ago. These women, after hearing a rumor that a man from the church was seen talking to Kemi after service, took it upon themselves to stage a fasting protest. In his 35 years of being in the service of God, he had never seen this type of behavior before. He took all the elders of the church, himself, and even these women children to beg them to stop what they were doing. But Lydie had a bigger hold on the Women Council. It was as if she had brainwashed them and they had no will of their own. It wasn't until one of the women fainted in the evening due to low blood sugar, the doctor said. That was when they had finally eaten something. The Women Council in the church used to be a peaceful group who helped women and never judged them. But when Pastor Kunle's wife died 10 years ago, they had gone through a drastic change. They were shrewd, judgmental, and extreme. Church was supposed to be a place of solace, refuge. They had turned it into a place of malice, physical and emotional battleground. Good morning, Pastor Kunle, Kemi said at the door to his office. As Pastor Kunle looked up, he smiled at her. Good morning, Kemi. Come in. Pastor Kunle looked at the girl. No, wait. She was now a woman in front of him. She had grown. He remembered when she and her parents would come to church every Sunday. They never missed a day unless one of them was ill. It came as a shock to even Pastor Kunle when he heard the news about her parents passing away in an accident. It was a few months after his wife passed away from an horrible illness. He knew there was a reason for everything, and so he always sent her money and provisions while she was at her aunt's house. But she left her aunt's house, or rather, she was kicked out at the age of 21. Her aunt had said that she could no longer raise her because she was too much of a burden. But Kemi was never a burden. She was hardworking and up at the crack of dawn. She never slacked at her job, and she was good at picking things up at a fast pace. He always felt guilty that he couldn't offer her more because a girl like that needed a bigger stage to show her talents, and he was going to make that happen for her. He knew she was destined for bigger things, and he hoped that the news he had for her would help make that happen. Kemi, Pastor Kunle began, were you listening to the announcement I made during service about a woman from the city who wants to empower whoever was interested in learning how to make jewelries? Kemi nodded. Well, Pastor Kunle continued, I would like you to put your name down because I believe it is a great opportunity. And I know you are a talented young woman. I wouldn't want anything to keep you from moving forward in life. Kemi didn't know what to say to the pastor. Was she excited that such an opportunity presented itself? Of course she was, but she was afraid of the church's women council's reaction. It had become more aggressive and volatile this past few months, but she knew she couldn't pass up the chance to learn something new and exciting, especially from a professional. And also, it was free of charge. The next day, she went to work at the church and told the pastor the good news he wanted to hear. She said yes and wrote her name down as a participant for the empowerment. Pastor Kunle was beaming with joy when Kemi gave him the good news. He knew she was worried about the Women Council and their reaction to her being part of anything in the church, but he was ready for anything and everything they had coming. 2 weeks after Kemi had written her name down, preparation began for the empowerment. The woman, Mrs. Fola, who had come from the city to teach them, had brought with her the materials they needed to make the jewelries, and she had also brought people who would assist her and check up on those who were participating. Kemi felt an unwavering excitement as she saw the preparations being done. The members of the Women Council were true to their nature as they murmured their displeasure, but they didn't voice out their discontent because the last stunt they pulled had made some people in the church turn their backs on them. Mrs. Fola was excited to have the opportunity to teach both men, women, girls, and boys how to make jewelry. Jewelry making was her first love, and up to this day, it still was. She could see that the participants were ready and excited to learn what she wanted to teach them. The training was going to last for 3 weeks, and as the first week ran out, the lazy pupils began to remove themselves from the class. She was hopeful that by the time the training would be over, she would be able to pick out 3 best students and take them to the city to train and work with her for a duration of 3 years, and then they can go off and start their own business. Jewelry making wasn't something easy, and it wasn't something difficult. It requires the maker to have patience and foresight. Hastening the process of making jewelry could ruin the design. But one advantage of jewelry making was if you made a mistake, you could turn it into another design. Her new students were learning all that she wanted them to. Some were frustrated because it wasn't as easy as they thought. Others were even more enthusiastic about it. Kemi caught Fola's eyes. She was patient and she was good with her hands, and she seemed to have a nose for design. All she needed was to own her own talent. What made Fola pay attention to Kemi was the rumors that surrounded her. She didn't understand where this rumor was coming from, but it had been 2 weeks since this training started, and the rumors were sordid. Some were told to her on purpose by several women, warning her to stay away from Kemi, and others whispered between her pupils. She knew what it felt like to be gossiped about, especially in a small village where everyone knew everyone. She grew up in one like this. She was condemned for wanting a career because you see, where she was from, women were only to be seen and never heard, and the talk of having a dream was a big taboo. Her very own father threw her out when he learned of her ambitions, saying, as a woman, she was supposed to bring money in from her dowry, not to waste money chasing a dream that wasn't real. But her mother gathered money and sent her to a aunt in the city where she trained, opened up her own shop, and became a success story. But before she could make it big, her father died. Perhaps that was God's plan. After all, you can't reap where you did not sow. She made sure she took care of her mother because she stood by her despite her father taunting her until the very end. It was the final week where the three winners would be selected. Fola was proud of herself and her students. Those who had stayed until the end would get basic materials to continue learning jewelry making, and the lucky three would go with her to the city. As Fola stood in front of her student, she called out the three top students' names: Tola, Kemi, and Shegun. Everyone clapped for them, but there were those who looked displeased with the results, but didn't dare say anything. Kemi couldn't believe it. She was going to the city to learn how to make jewelry. It was a dream she hadn't thought of, and it scared her as well. She was leaving the place she had called home since she was a child, but she knew she needed a change, no matter how scared she was. Kemi couldn't hold back her tears as she said goodbye to Pastor Kunle. She entered the bus, looking out of the window, saying goodbye to the home she knew, and a wave of emotions tied up in her. She was sad, happy, and scared, but she knew that she had made the right decision and she was going to follow through with it. Tola knew she made the right decision in picking the three finalists. She put them up in her boys' quarters. The two girls shared one room while the boys stayed in one. It's been 2 months since they arrived, and they hadn't given her a cause to complain. They always called the church to speak to their parents every weekend, and life went on as usual. Tola always felt like she was constantly having to battle for attention. Whenever they were at the shop, the customers seemed to like Kemi better than her. They would ask her for help when choosing their jewelry and would go to her for advice on which jewelry they should pick. Tola and Kemi both studied under the same woman, so she didn't understand why customers would prefer to talk to Kemi instead of her. She had tried everything from being polite to always agreeing with the choice of the customers. She never argued with them, so why were they always seeking Kemi's advice when they made their final decision? She knew that one day she would stand tall and strong, and she would be better than Kemi, so she did her very best. Kemi made sure she wrote down everything Madame Fola said. She would go through everything she had learned the previous day. She had also learned how to voice out her opinion, which was something she was never good at. Mrs. Fola was someone who loved it when people gave her their honest opinion, so she would always call on Kemi when she wanted to make a final decision on her designs. At first, Kemi was afraid to speak her mind, but Mrs. Fola always put her at ease. Over time, she found it easier for her to speak her mind, and over time, Mrs. Fola started allowing Kemi to handle small designs. Yemi walked into the jewelry shop. It was the definition of handsome and chocolate. As he entered the shop, everyone's jaw dropped. You just couldn't help it. It was good looking. It was dressed to the nines. His body wore the suit to perfection, and his smile was inviting. The presence of Yemi drove up the competition among the women working at the shop. Mrs. Fola guided Yemi into her office so he could tell her how he would like his gift for his mother's 50th birthday to be made. Yemi had spent about 30 minutes in Mrs. Fola's office, discussing this and that about the jewelry pieces. Mrs. Fola picked up her phone and called Kemi so she could help her with the designs. I wouldn't call it love at first sight, but there was a spark when both eyes met and their gaze lingered on, until Mrs. Fola cleared her throat to snap both of them to reality. Kemi tried to keep her focus on designing and listening to the instructions her boss was giving her, but she still felt his gaze on her. She was glad when it was finally over and they had finalized the designs and signed the contract. A week into making the jewelry Mr. Yemi Adigbade ordered, Mrs. Fola traveled abroad for a jewelry making seminar for 3 weeks. She left Kemi in charge of making the designs and also delivering the jewelries to Mr. Yemi. Yemi was in the store every other day. He came with the excuse of checking on the progress of the jewelry, but that was nothing but a lie. He couldn't stop thinking about Kemi. She was all he could think of. So he came to the store and asked her to revise the design over and over again. He knew it was cruel of him, and she was patient at first, but she was slowly losing her temper at him. After so many revisions one late Saturday evening, Kemi had had enough of this man. She endured so much of his nuisance because he was their VIP client, but she was fed up. Look, I haven't eaten lunch or breakfast because you have been here all day, complaining about this and that. When Kemi finished, she was breathless. Yemi looked at Kemi in shock. He didn't know she had it in her to raise her voice or get angry at him. She had been enduring him for quite a while. Yemi rose to his feet and said, "Then let's have dinner, since I have starved you." Kemi couldn't believe the audacity of this man, but she was hungry and just couldn't refuse, and so she spent the evening with him at a restaurant eating dinner, where they got to know each other more, and that was the beginning of their relationship. Yemi's jewelry was finally finished, and he had no other reason to come and see Kemi. Kemi asked to keep their relationship a secret because she didn't want Mrs. Fola thinking low of her. Already she got dirty looks from her co-workers whenever Yemi came to talk about the designs. They saw each other whenever they were free. She loved Yemi and he loved her back, and he treated her so well that she couldn't believe her luck. He was well-read, well-traveled, and he always showed interest in her designs. He would tell her how talented she was. She was glad to have Pastor Kunle, Mrs. Fola, and Yemi in her life because they saw her for who she was. 2 years into the training, it was a Tuesday like any other day, but something was wrong. Mrs. Fola couldn't find the jewelry for one of her VIP customers, and the jewelry, which was a ring, was going to be picked up in 3 days. She called all her staff members and questioned them one by one, but no one could tell her what had happened to the ring. It was a gold ring with 5-carat diamonds, and our employees kept searching all day, but it proved futile. Then Tola said, "Ma, Kemi is the only one who has the keys to your office, so perhaps she knows where the ring is. After all, the lock to your office wasn't broken." Everyone went into stunned silence at the meaning of Tola's words. When Kemi came back from the errands she was sent on, she felt accusing eyes on her, and as she went into Madame Fola's office, she felt heavy, but she went in anyways. When Mrs. Fola recounted what had happened, Kemi felt like someone gave her a hard slap across the face. She frantically looked into the safe the ring was placed and found nothing, no matter how much she searched. Then she remembered the keys to Mrs. Fola's office, which was usually kept in her bag. She was afraid that the key had been stolen, and so she picked up a bag and threw her things on the floor. And there it was, the keys. It was in her bag. It wasn't stolen. How could a ring walk out of a closed room? She started crying. She knew the fingers would start pointing at her. Mrs. Fola was at a loss. She had known Kemi for 2 years and she had never stolen or lost anything, but she had no choice but to call the police. After Mrs. Fola called the police, she remembered the camera she had hidden in her office. So she took out the camera and played the video, and she was shocked when she saw who stole the ring. When the police arrived, Mrs. Fola pointed to none other than Shegun. She said, "That is the culprit." Everyone was shocked. How could it be Shegun? Mrs. Fola showed everyone, including the police, the video of Shegun coming in at night and taking the ring. Shegun burst into tears and confessed that he did that to teach Kemi a lesson because he had once professed his love for her, but she chose Femi, who was rich. He said he wasn't a thief, he just wanted to teach her a lesson by putting her in her place. Mrs. Fola didn't press any charges against him after so much pleading from Shegun and his family. Also, he returned the stolen ring. She sent him packing, and that was his end of his apprenticeship with her. 3 years later, the village was buzzing and lively. Why, you ask? Well, apparently, a wealthy man and his beautiful wife were coming for Thanksgiving in the church. As the car pulled up, Kemi and Yemi came out, and Laide's jaw dropped. So did the other women of the church. Pastor Kule came out beaming with a bright smile. He was happy that Kemi brought her husband home. He could see that she was truly happy and well taken care of. She had told him about how she met Yemi, and now she opened up her own shop and continued with the work she had learned from Madame Fola. Finally, he had nothing to worry about. As the choir began to sing, Kemi and Yemi danced their way into the church, bearing gifts with them. They danced past the group of women whose jaw hadn't been pulled up from the floor. The end. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video.